Good morning, Year 12. So, today we are going to be talking about different types of blood vessels. I might move my face down to the bottom right to get out of the way. Yeah. So we're going to talk about 5 different types of blood vessels, all of which are on the board at the moment. We go through some information about each one, and then I think at the end it will be worth you going back over your through your textbook and making sure that you've understood all this, because there's quite a lot of information that's going to come out, and unfortunately it's just a lot of memory more than anything else. So, there are 5 different types of blood vessel. Now, from the heart, the blood leaves from the left ventricle into the aorta, and hopefully everyone remembers their basic heart structure. Obviously that's year 9 stuff, but some people do struggle with it. If you still struggle with that, it's literally a look, cover, write, repeat job. Cover up the heart, try and figure out where each bit goes, and then look and see if you're right. And you have to do that 100 times until you get it perfectly, because you can't do this topic without understanding the heart. But assuming you've got that, blood is leaving, oxygenated blood is leaving from the left ventricle up into the aorta. Now the aorta, as I'm sure you are aware, is an artery, the largest artery in the body, under the highest pressure. Now the aorta then splits off into many different arteries, which split into smaller and smaller and smaller arteries until they get into the individual tissues in your organs, your muscles, and different places. Now, arteries, when they get to near where they're going to branch off, they split off into arterioles. Now, arterioles are coming off at regular intervals off of the arteries. So it's a bit like a motorway system, if you like. The blood is travelling very fast along the artery, but it can't easily, the oxygen inside can't easily get out from the artery. That's like being on a motorway. You're on the motorway, you're going in one direction extremely fast. All right? In order to get off the motorway, you have to take an exit. And there are regular exits every few miles. In the same way here, if you want to get off the artery, you have to go down an arteriole. Now, down an arteriole, now often, when you're going down an exit, it doesn't lead you anywhere directly, and it's the same way with the arteriole too. An arteriole is still too thick for the oxygen to get out of, and so after a while the arteriole will split off, and regularly coming off of the arteriole will be capillaries. And these are called capillary networks or capillary beds, and you can see that here. And there will be a capillary networks and capillary beds coming off of each side of the arteriole regularly. So the aorta splits into smaller arteries, the arteries branch off into arterioles every now and then eventually the arterioles branch off into capillary networks every now and then. And the blood gets into smaller and smaller and smaller tubes. Now, this is where the tissue fluid topic would come in. I'm doing that separately. You've already been taught that by me, or if you need another video for that, then I'll be sending that to you shortly. However, once the blood cells are in the capillary network and the oxygen or nutrients are in the tissue fluid, the transfer of waste products back into the blood and the usage of the oxygen or the nutrients by the cells happens at the capillary network. And the capillaries are surrounded by cells. So by the time we come to the end of the capillary network, we've lost most of the oxygen, almost all of it. We've gained a load of carbon dioxide. We've lost all of the glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids, and glycerols that were useful. And they've been replaced with urea and various other nasty byproducts, which have to go to the rest of the body, such as the liver, the kidney, or, well, largely the liver and the kidney, to be fair. So then we're going to go into a venule. So at the end of this capillary network is a venule. If you like, you've kind of done your trip, you've gone to where you need to go with the cells outside the capillary network. You need to now get back onto the motorway to go back home. So you're going to go into the venule. The venule then will travel back to a vein, and the vein will carry blood back to the heart again. So it's a really nice system here. And there are capillary networks all over you, everywhere. And this is why people say, oh, if I took all of your blood vessels and wrapped them, all in a straight line, wrapped them around the earth, they go around the earth, 1.5 times or something. Yeah, probably, maybe that's true. But this is based on all the capillaries as well. And the capillaries are microscopic, incredibly tiny, and they are everywhere. If I zoomed in and in on your hand, yes, I would see skin cells, and I would see sebaceous glands for sweat, I'd see all of that, but I would see an enormous web of capillaries just covering the whole thing at a microscopic level, so that you physically can't stick a pin in your hand. Don't do it. You physically can't stick a pin in your hand without hitting a capillary. They are everywhere. That's why if you cut anything, it will bleed, because you will always hit a capillary. So there's lots of them. That's the point I'm trying to make. Now let's talk about the structure of the different blood vessels. So, I'm going to go through them in order. Now, I suppose I have to move my head there. Actually, no, I'm going to get rid of my face because it's just going to get in the way wherever it is. Let's do that. Right. Now, you've got 5 blood vessels here, and you can see it's a really nice diagram, this, and I think that's very helpful. The kind of size changes and the composition of the different parts. So arteries have to transport blood rapidly under high pressure, and they're transporting it from the heart. So the heart's going to pump, it's going to create enormous hydrostatic pressure, and that causes a lot of pressure on the arteries. Now, if they were not careful, they would burst. That's why they need a nice thick elastic layer to allow them to stretch. They need a thick wall, and they need a lot of fibrous tissue and smooth muscle in order to prevent the whole thing from bursting. Now, there are no valves except where they leave the heart. So there's semilunar valves as they leave the heart to prevent the blood flowing back from the aorta or back from the pulmonary artery into the heart. But there are no valves other than that, because valves are to prevent backflow, and this stuff is under such high pressure it's not going to flow backwards, it's going to flow forward. That will then split into the arteriole. And if you need to pause me to take any notes, obviously do. That would always split into the arterioles, and they are under much lower pressure. By the time we get to the arterioles, the blood is slowed down a lot. Now, that's why they don't need such thick walls. You can see they still have a smooth muscle surface, but they do not need the elastic tissue or the fibrous tissue. And they're actually over 10 times smaller. And wait for the bell to stop. I say 10 times, they're over 100 times smaller than the artery itself. Okay, now, the muscle layer is thicker, it's relatively thicker. Excuse me, yes, of course, because they're much smaller, the overall muscle relatively is much thicker, but the actual thickness is smaller, if you see what I mean. Because it's a much smaller tube, a higher percentage of the wall is made of muscle, but it is much smaller, and so overall it is much less thick. Right, fine. Then we've got to the capillary. Now, the capillary is the absolute smallest possible tube. It is literally made of cells wrapped around. So it's one cell thick. You can't physically get smaller than that in a living organism. And most of it is the endothelium. In fact, 99.9% of it is the endothelium. There's an enormous amount of them. They have a very small lumen, and there are spaces between the endothelial cells. Then we come to the venules. Now, the venules are carrying blood from the capillaries back to the veins, and again, they've got very, very little muscle or elastic tissue because it's extremely low pressure. By the point the red blood cells have transported themselves through the capillaries, they are travelling very slowly, and so you don't need your thick muscle or any elastic tissue, really. You've just got their endothelium and their fibrous tissue. And then finally, we're going to transport back to the veins, and they transport blood very slowly under low pressure. Now, they are relatively large, larger than the arteries, actually, but they have a very thin wall, and so they have a very large lumen. Now, they have to have valves, and that's to prevent the blood from flowing backwards, where it should be flowing forwards. Now, what I would like you to do is, I'd like you to go to your textbook, and I'd like you to find a page on this topic. There's a few more things to add in here, particularly the functions of each of these four. Now, there is no point in me just reading this to you, and to be honest, reading this bit to you has been a bit of a waste of your time listening to me, because a lot of this is just memory. There's nothing to explain here. You need to know what the endothelium, what the elastic tissue, what the smooth muscle, and what the fibrous tissue do. And once you've done that, that is this entire topic finished. So hopefully that's been helpful to you. If you have any questions at any point, obviously just ask your teacher as normal. And I will look forward to seeing you at school shortly.